Okay, thank you. The world I hope for is one where kids and young people, I'm going to start over. Sorry. The world I hope for is a place where kids and young people feel that they can ignore the unspoken and unfair social rules that are put out there and find the social courage to speak up for for themselves, as well as be engaged bystanders who speak up for others. So gaining our social courage, it starts with getting conviction in what you believe and what your values are. And a lot of people go through life and they think suddenly social courage is just going to land on them eventually, it'll just happen. But in reality, it is a practice of listening to your heart and questioning norms and sometimes enduring painfully awkward moments. Now, the thing about awkwardness is that we all try to avoid it, right? But if you're willing to dive into awkward soup, swim to the other side, get out and shake yourself off, it's then you realize that you survived and you gain another layer of social courage. Now, we're all complicated, multidimensional people, but social media doesn't always capture all of those dimensions, right? A lot of people spend time cultivating their image online, and sometimes it's fully fabricated, sometimes it's slightly exaggerated, and most of the time it just highlights the most amazing parts of life. And that can be really stressful because sometimes your reality doesn't really align with what you put out there. And it's also hard because if you're someone who's, scrolling through people's posts and people's, lives, seeing their lives, you start to compare yourself and feel inadequate. So that can be really an anxiety, causing situation. And it really takes social courage to put your true self out there online and not worry about or even obsess about how people are going to react or if they react at all. And it can be really tricky to navigate friendships with people who constantly seek validation online. And for someone who's so desperate for praise, there's no amount of comments or likes that will fill that void for them, right? And, people put the sexy pictures out there and get the usual comments, hot, gorge, goals, so cute, and I hate you, heart, 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 heart. And if you're the kid who didn't, respond, sometimes your friend will find you and be like, so why didn't you comment on my post or at least like it? So you get all this feedback, right? So it can be a full-time job keeping the praise junkie fed. Now, by keeping a balance on how we use devices and social media, we can, cultivate great friendships and healthy relationships and also stay grounded. But this array of social media platforms makes it possible to really avoid developing social courage. And with your peers as the referees on social media, microaggressions tend to be tolerated. A lot of people feel free to make comments that are racist, homophobic, sexist, transphobic, just to name a few. And those are places where people really feel like that's where you want to show social courage. Now, having social courage is not about being an extrovert. We all know those shy, more introverted friends who are so strong and have clear boundaries, and they don't speak up much, but when they do, we all listen, right? All of a sudden they assert themselves and drop this huge wisdom bomb, and we're all like, yes, preach it. But putting aside your fear of rejection or your fear of exclusion to confront someone in person, that's a challenging thing, but it's worth aiming for. And if you're not there yet, speaking up online is perfectly acceptable as well. So harassment and bullying, that certainly happens on social media, for sure. But really, most of the time, it's really more about subtle forms of harshness, underhanded jabs and snarky comments, and sometimes fully mean comments followed by a just kidding. So there's the mop up afterwards. A lot of kids talk about being left out of group chats, or they were in a group chat and then the group makes a new group chat and only leaves them off, and they kind of wonder, well, what was the reason? And they assume it's some unspoken rule that they weren't playing by, right? And with the distance of using our phones, we have the emotional distance and safety. So we don't really, have to practice social courage because we don't have to be held accountable for what we say and do face to face. And when you do confront someone courageously and call them out for being offensive, sometimes you pay a consequence, right? People write all these negative comments publicly, shamed, but not saying something, that is what can feel unsettling. And, with that feeling of that you didn't say something, that should inspire you to, aim to dive in that soup and swim to the other side. So when we start building social courage, the first thing is to witness other people who have it and who demonstrate it. And so with positive role models who are showing social courage in all forms, that's when we can start developing a plan for how we're going to start practicing. And I want you to think right now in your own minds, take a moment and think about a situation or someone who was socially courageous. And think about, how did people react? What did it feel like? What did it look like? And how did it make you feel to witness it? So I had the good fortune of growing up marinated in social courage. I mean, look at this clan of fashion enemies right here, 1979. That's me in the corner. I was crying because they wouldn't let me wear my baseball cap because it might ruin the family picture. I beg to differ that I think there's a lot of things contributing to a sketchy picture, but I hear them. Anyway, so these people, I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and my parents and my siblings were all righteous nonconformists. And they made cringeworthy moments a regular occurrence in my life. And I remember if we were going out in public, sometimes I'd say to my parents, do you think maybe you could just kind of blend here, like hoping? And my father, he had no patience for such nonsense. He would be like, too many people in the world, blend and behave. Find the courage to be your own person. Now, my mother, she was no slack in that department either. Even the smallest injustice, she couldn't help herself. She had to speak up. I remember on multiple occasions going to the grocery store with her as a kid, and we'd be about to pull into a parking spot and someone would go in front of her and take her spot. She'd throw that car and park, calmly get out, go around, knock on the window. Oh my gosh. And something about her bold conviction, people would back their car out and give her spot. But imagine my sister and I are crouched down in the car, horrified, totally horrified. And after grocery shopping, on the way home, we would pepper her with a lot of feedback on how she could have handled that situation differently. With a wave of the hand, she would say, "Don't be ridiculous, girls. What would happen to that man if no one told him that he was rude? Besides, being embarrassed is good for the soul." So part of my social courage training involved frequent reminders that you can be a nice person who's also polite, but as you're also can be fierce when someone crosses your boundaries and assertive, right? That is an important lesson. So in middle school and high school, I would speak up for things that I cared about. By the time I got to college, I grew more comfortable speaking up and holding people accountable when they were rude or offensive. And if people made disparaging comments about women, I'd step right up and let them know what I thought, even though they would try to silence me. There was always someone who would be like, "What are you, some kind of feminist?" I'd be like, as a matter of fact, I am, as we all should be. And, I think if my lack of compliance would repel that person and offend them so much, that kind of confirmed that my natural social filters were working quite well. And so for young people, think about what bugs you, what offends you, or hurts your feelings online and off. And if people don't want to be around you because you're speaking your truth, trust your repellents and move them right along. So once we start building social courage, the next step is to reinforce it in our communities. And think about what it would be like if it was a norm for people to call out online cruelty, if that was a norm. What if people supported other people who were socially courageous, right? And what would it look like if, what would it look like if we reinforced that everywhere we went with our friends? And how would it be if everyone felt perfectly free to be their authentic self online and off? So it is up to us to recognize, to build, to practice and spread social courage. The world I hope for is a place that supports you to muster social courage and speak up for what matters and for what you know is right in your heart. Thank you.